Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the CCP Reality Check, which is another episode. I am your host, David Starwatcher, from the Washington, D.C. farm of the new federal state of China. As for tonight, we are going to looking into an event that has happened in China and that has shocked the world. Now, let's move on. Tonight's title is, as we see here, it's called Behind Former President Hu Jintao's Forced Departure from the Closing Ceremony of the 20th National Congress of the CCP. So we move on to take a look at the main character today, who is Hu Jintao. Hu Jintao was the former president from 2002 to 2012. General Secretary of the CCP from 2002 to 2012, and the chairman of the Central Military Commission of the CCP of the PRC, as known as the Commander-in-Chief of the PRC from around 2004 to 2012. Per the party's constitution of the CCP, the General Secretary can only have 2 consecutive terms, and Hu followed the party's constitution set rule by resigning from all posts in 2012. So the CCP's party's constitution, to bear in mind though, it is above the PRC's constitution. So now let's move on to take a look at the video about what happened to Hu Jintao. So we see that in this section, we now see that in the presidium, there's Hu Jintao, Xi Jinping, Li Ganshu, Wang Huning, Li Keqiang, and Wang Yang. You see here, the bodyguard of Xi Jinping grabbed his hand at the arm of Hu Jintao, and Li Ganshu handed the document into the hand of the bodyguard of Xi Jinping. Hu, as you see here from his action, he sit on his chair, and as we also see in this section, he was unwilling to leave. This all happened in the closing ceremony of the CCP's 20th National Congress. So we now see the whole story of this very shocking video that is circling around the world. Now, we have to ask the question at the end of this video. So now we see, why was the former president forced to leave the scene? To answer this question, we have found that Mr. Mao Squall have revealed the true reason as an answer to the question, why was the former president forced to leave the scene? As Mr. Mao Squall revealed in his newest live stream today on why Hu Jintao was forced to leave. So we now move on to take a look at his revelation.
胡准备了给今天大会的，他有几点建议，建议不要打台湾，对台湾政策要明确，任何情况都不打台湾，反对隔离政策，要继续经济改革开放，发展党内民主，然后说当年我下来的时候，就是遵循了党内的民主制度，不要超过2届。晋平同志这回干3届是特殊时期，我是支持。 但是下不为例，下一届不能再干，他是这回事儿，是反对你到第4届。
So now, before we look at where is Hu Jintao and his family now, for a quick summary, that Hu Jintao had made a lot of proposals that goes against Xi Jinping's agenda. That Xi Jinping put into the final report of the party's National Congress. So now the pressing question that we have to ask ourselves is, where is Hu Jintao and his family now? According to Mr. Mao Squaw's same live stream, Hu Jintao is now under home arrest ordered by Xi Jinping in Jingxi Hotel. The special point about the Jingxi Hotel is that Jingxi Hotel is not open to the public, and the general public has no access. Hu's family, including his wife, his children, their spouses, and his grandchildren, is all arrested. Bear in mind, if you cannot remember what I'm saying, I will repeat that again. Whose family, including his wife, his children, their spouses, and his grandchildren, is all arrested under the ordered by Xi Jinping. So it's not just ended here, because Hu Jintao has disappeared from social media searches and Bilibili's version of the 2008 Beijing Olympics opening in China, which I refer to as the Internet of China. So Hu Jintao just simply disappeared after the event's occurrence. So we have to move on to ask another big question. People may ask, well, this former president was taken away, of course, and that sounds a little bit strange, but what are the key issues of the CCP's National Congress that we should take note of? It's the party's Congress, right? To answer that question, we have to move on next to looking at two aspects of the CCP system. One is the CCP's election, and two is its election of the two committees. Now let's move on to looking into the first aspect. The first aspect, it's called the CCP's election. Now we move on to take a look about what is the CCP's election. Election within the CCP system, we have to cut it down into two parts. One is in general, another one is the National Congress specific. So now we looking into the in general part. Candidacy within the CCP in general, of course, it does not have explicit instruction on the election process. It does not say any clear indication of how many candidates are allowed. They just simply say you're allowed to. 3, these rules, instructions, and indication, and any of how many candidates are allowed, they will change anytime by the discretion of the superior organization. The fourth point, as most of the time, what will happen is that there's no election at all, but merely appointments from the superior to the ulterior, which means from the upper level organization sending the people to the one that's in a lower rank, because the party's constitution allows it to do so during the remaining end of the session, but basically saying you don't have election at all, but they just simply take away the old leaders, and the superior can do anything they please to change the leader of the lower level organization. With all these 4 points in place, that leaves large rooms of manipulations. To clearly help our viewers understanding what's really going on, I would like to use the case of Xi Jinping. When Xi, of course, is in a much higher level, Xi is was actually when he was in Beijing and when he was trying to become a member of the Politburo Standing Committee, of which I will address that later. Xi Jinping went to some of the superior leaders, not superior leaders, but the older members or the more influential members of the CCPs. He went to their households, paid them a visit, and trying to gain their support And then he was doing everything he can to show that if he was very, very much, how should I say, not to say faithful, but at least he showed them that he is reliable. So that is the general part. So now we move on to the party congress. So at this part, we now see that the candidacy within the CCP, which is in the National Congress at this scenario, again, no explicit instruction on the election and the nomination process, but these processes and nominations are changeable by the Central Committee of the CCP. So to address a little bit more before we move on to the second point, the Central Committee's decisions follows who? It follows the Politburo. And the Politburo follows the one of the Politburo Standing Committee, and which is shorthanded as the PSC. And the PSC follows the instruction of General Secretary, the highest ranking leader inside the CCP system. And the second point is that there's no clear indication of how many candidates are allowed. There's a list of them. These 5 positions listed have no clear indication of how many are allowed. So these candidates are Politburo members of the party's standing committees, and the General Secretary. It also includes the members of the Military Committee and the chairman of the Central Military Commission. You may try to think by yourself, does that mean that there are a lot of candidates in place to compete for these positions? The answer in reality is no. So before I said why that is a negative answer, I will elaborate a little bit more on the no clear instruction on the election process and methods. The voting, if you have seen any video clips, the voting is usually done by raising hands. And even there are vote casting, these votes are not anonymous, which means your name will be visible on the votes. If you voted against someone, they will know. That is the election. That is how the election works within the CCP National Congress. So we are also going to look into several other aspects, because that is something going to answer some of the questions you may raise during this process. You may want to ask, is there any open debate, or the process, if the process are opened, or how many candidates are there per position? Let's move on to the next one. We will be looking into them. So in the missionary parts, for the first question, no open debate. 2, the process is secretive. 3, it is very, very different from the elections we know. There's only one candidate per position in election. That basically means these votes are confirmation votes only, and if you voted against them, they know what you have done, and if they want to do anything against you, they will find you. Number 4 is, no one can become a candidate without their superior's approval. That is very important. So I will elaborate on that part a little bit more. You cannot apply and then become a candidate yourself. Some of the people in China in the past have attempted it, but it did not work. You need to be one candidate after your superiors have engaged discussion and agreement. If they agree that you are going to become a candidate, you can. If they don't agree with you, then that's it. So in the case of Hu, I would like to elaborate a little bit more. Hu has actually supported Xi for the third term, but he opposed Xi for the fourth term. And that, for we all see here, this is the end of the election within the CCP system part. So now we are going to looking into the elections of the two committees. So you might be going to ask why we should be aware of the elections of the two committees. I mean, they are just inside the CCP. We will be looking into them in detail to see some significance. First one is the Central Committee of the CCP. The Central Committee has the power to elect the General Secretary and the members of the Politburo. In reality, the process of deciding who can be candidates for the members of the Central Committee is secretive. So in general, what will really happening is the Politburo is being consulted, and the Politburo's decision on who can enter the Central Committee usually follows that of the General Secretary. That means the General Secretary has the final say on which type of person or which type of clique or what is the, in the past, we may view as what is the power balance be like. But at this one, we're just trying to show you that the General Secretary has the final say on the Politburo's decision on who can enter the Central Committee. So now, since we have mentioned the Politburo, we are going to looking into what Politburo and the Politburo Standing Committee is. Politburo and Politburo Standing Committee. So these are all inside the same system called a Politburo, but Politburo's power is centralized in the hand of the Politburo Standing Committee. So this setting is different from the other countries' communist Politburo. The candidate of the General Secretary must be from the Politburo Standing Committee according to the party's constitution of the CCP. However, in reality, the voting is a confirmation voting. And by saying confirmation voting, we have already mentioned that is only a one candidate only, one in one position, no other candidates, only that candidate only. And the candidate has to be agreed upon by the Politburo members. Even more importantly, no vote has been cast against the candidate since 1949. So that makes the process appear as if there is a democracy, but this process in reality did very little, close to nothing. As we already saying, from the start until this point, we always suggesting that the General Secretary has the final say on who can enter the system and the so-called committees. So now we can come to the summary. Everything about who can be the members of each committee is in fact decided by the General Secretary. The elections are for show. And from whose case the CCP system would not truly allow in this case, dissent exists within the party. Dissent in the CCP is almost, or in this case, indeed the end of one's political career. The last point, which is very important, is that in the CCP, no one is safe. We will look into several of the examples, in the next episode. So please stay tuned. So now we are approaching the end of today's episode. So we should all be vigilant to the true evilness of the CCP. So that is the end of today's topic. So before we end this episode, I would like to give some time to read our viewers' chat who is watching our show. Okay, so I have seen our dear viewers got YP Yen 1024. I thank you very much for joining us. I would like to read some of his thoughts over what's happening. He said, "I cannot imagine who was thrown out like a piece of trash by his political heir, Xi Jinping." Yes, when who was the president, Xi Jinping was the vice president of the PRC. That is very important. And Xi's cruelty and his insult are not understandable. While I would say, please, I will say, calm myself down and see if we going back to Mr. Mao Squaw's live stream, we can find out, yes, it may be ununderstandable to a lot of people, but if we look into Mr. Mao Squaw's revelation, then we will find out that if she has any kind of these brutality, or any kind of these harshness, it is merely not surprising. And oh, thank you from Mo Dao Shi. Thank you. He said, "Good job, David." Oh, thank you very much, Mo Dao Shi, and thank you. And now I think we approach the end of this episode. I would like to say thank you for joining us tonight, and please stay tuned on the episodes that is concentrating on this event, as we are going to looking deeper into more details of the event and what is really behind the forced departure of former President Hu Jintao from the party's National Congress and the party's National Congress closing ceremony. Thank you very much for joining me tonight. I'm your host, David Starwatcher, and I wish you all have a good night.